This is Christmas Eve 2016, and I'm Curtis Huyser, and I'm with my mom, Edith Huyser Mathis, and she has preserved quite a few of the family heirlooms and artifacts, and we're going to go around the house this afternoon, and she's going to tell little stories about each one so that the history is preserved.
I hope you find it interesting.
Okay, this is where it all begins with the Mathis marriage certificate. Can you tell us something about this?
My mom and dad were married the 19th of October, 1905.
And this is the original, right?
That is the original marriage certificate. When my parents died, we just divided up all their accessories and things, and we got to choose.
Yeah.
But I was number 10, so I got to choose last. And then I chose this, and my oldest brother says, I should really have that because I was the oldest. And I says, tough, you should have taken it. These two items, this is a fountain pen of my dad. It's not a fountain pen, it's just a pen. You'd have to dip it in the inkwell. And this, I really don't know what it is. It's some sort of a little...
Like a little gavel.
Gavel.
Or class or something.
Yeah.
Come to attention. But tell how hard, did you have to write with pens like that when you went to school?
No, we got to the fountain pen stage.
Oh, okay. So this you had to have an inkwell, and that's why all the desks always had those big splotches of ink because that bottle got tipped over or whatever.
And the kids played with it.
How much could you write? Like a sentence with that, or how often did you have to dip it in?
No, once every word,
Every word?
think.
My goodness.
You'd have to dip it. This little hole is supposed to hold the ink, you see, and feed it on down.
I guess that's an improvement over feathers, but
slightly.
So now, behind you, there are sort of the next generation of family photos.
This is a picture of my mom and dad on their wedding day.
So that's John Mathis and
Jeanette Voss. And it still seems strange that, well, she's sitting, he's standing. There are some pictures where it's just the opposite way around, but each one is different.
Now, did you get a copy, or there was a pick in order?
There were a couple of pictures, and I made copies for all of the family.
Oh, that's nice.
I kept the original.
There you go.
And this is a picture of Irvin's parents, William Huyser and Stella Vanderkamp, and
Wedding picture.
Wedding picture, and this is December 20th. Their anniversary was December 23rd. I cannot tell you the year.
Oh, I have that. But yeah, I think my grandfather looks kind of like I remember him. He actually looks like Cameron Huyser quite a bit.
And this is just a picture of us taken when Irvin was a member of the board of the Chapin Bank in Chapin, Illinois. And they were taking pictures, and that picture was taken then.
So those are sort of the beginnings of the family Huyser Mathis. So Grandma, tell us about this room. This looks like it has some very interesting antiques.
This is an antique bedroom set of my parents. It's three-piece, the bed, the dresser, and what they call the vanity. When my parents died and we divided up their things between the 10 children, they were going to give this to the Salvation Army because antiques were not in vogue at that time. I said, well, if you're going to do that, I'm going to take it. So I took it with me. It was very, very dark. This roll on the back of the bed was practically worn down to the wood of all of us kids standing there and rubbing our hands on it.
So the varnish had aged to make it almost black?
Yes, the varnish had aged to make it that dark.
And that would have been about how many years? Maybe 60, 70 years?
50, yeah. And so then, when I had it all done, and I was kind of proud of the project, my second oldest brother said to me, well, you were the only one that wasn't born in that bed. How come you have the bed? I said, well, nobody else wanted it, so I took it. And I was the only one. Mom's children were all born at home, except I was the last one, and I was giving her a rough time. So she had to go to the hospital. So that is the story of the bed. And the bedspread, I crocheted for it, and all little squares and sewn together.
Took a long time.
Yes, it did, but
So this bed looks really short. You ever measure how long it is?
well, no, but you cannot buy a mattress to fit it now
Oh,
because it is smaller.
yeah.
Or a spring either. It has kind of a weird spring under it, but
So now this is the dresser and mirror.
yeah. And the mirror has a defect in it, but that's just because of age.
Yeah.
And makes it look authentic. This is a piece of crochet work which my mother made while she was carrying me, so it would be 89 years old.
Was that just for decoration, or what was the purpose of
It
that?
was, yeah, it was just for decoration. I think you could possibly make a bell pull out of it or something, but I have not done anything with it. This is a dress or scarf which she crocheted when she was 80 years old.
Meaning your mom.
My mom.
Wow.
Mhm. And
Is that the original hardware, like handles and knobs?
yes,
as far as you
this is
know?
all original handware. If you see Antiques
Yeah.
Roadshow, they're very picky about
Yeah.
whether the hardware has been changed.
Now, what is the purpose of the other dresser? What do you call
Well, they used to have these big bowls and pictures. There was no bathroom.
that? Ah, for washing.
You had water in your picture. If you were a guest in this room, you'd have water in the picture. You'd have a bowl. Your towels hung over here, which wasn't a good idea. This is varnish, wet towels, wet. But that was its purpose.
So then the Mathises, of course, had all these kids, and they had to put them in some sort of high chair. Is that correct?
That's right, and all 10 of us used this same high chair, and why it never fell over when we were in it, I don't know, because I have a picture of Tyler and Tiffany sitting in it, and it's kind of tippy. It worried me until they were out.
So they always had to kick one of them out at about a year and a half or 2 years old?
Well, my mom had babies every 2 years.
Yeah.
And I refinished it also.
Wow, that's
So-
amazing.
Okay.
Oh.
This is a blanket which my sister-in-law, Pauline Mathis, made for Kurt Huyser. I think it was very sweet of her to do that, and it's nice and warm and cozy because we lived in some cold houses.
Yeah, I remember that blanket
You
very
remember
well.
that blanket? Okay.
Okay, thank you. Now, what about the books on the shelf? Those are...
And they're not important, they're just some
Okay.
Reader's Digest books.
Okay, thank you. So Grandma, here we have some old pieces of furniture that I remember, I think, seeing in some old photographs. But tell us about this chair.
This is a called a little sewing rocker, which belonged to Irvin's grandmother, Kate Huyser. And he remembers her sitting here and doing needlework, making quilts and that type of thing. She was a big lady. I don't know how she fit in this little chair. And it is caned, which is sort of a lost art, but they may be reviving it again. This table also belonged to Irvin's grandmother, Kate Huyser, and underneath it there's a little sticker that says it was purchased in Pella and the year, but they didn't give the price. And these two chairs belong to my grandparents, William Voss and the caning was bad on the one, so I had it recaned.
But one of them is original caning?
Yeah, one is original cane, and the other one was broken, and so I had it recaned.
There's some interesting carving on the backs of those chairs.
Well, that's the way chairs were carved in that day. They did a lot of carving.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. So here's some very interesting things. Edith and Irvin got married in, what was the...
1950.
And then not long after that, Irvin got drafted and had to go serve during the Korean War. Fortunately, he got to go to Germany instead of Korea. And you folks exchanged letters, probably?
Yeah.
How long did it take a letter to get back and forth?
Well, that depended. If he was way back in the woods when he wrote it,
Yeah.
it didn't come in to camp for 4 or 5 days. So, 2 weeks maybe.
2 weeks, okay.
There was no Skype,
Yeah.
nothing like
How
that.
about telephone? I mean,
I received one telephone call from him,
Yeah.
but the time was so different, like 8 and 10 hours difference.
yeah, quite a few hours.
And it was
later.
hard for him to get access to a phone. And
So while he was there, though, it sounds like he did some shopping. So tell us what treasures you have in this cabinet.
well, he sent me an 8-piece dinner set. It is Dresden china, trimmed in gold. And if you'll remember, Dresden was bombed, and I do not quite know how they recovered enough to manufacture things. But well, I first received this tea set, service for 8, in a big wooden crate. And I thought that was it. Well, about 3 days later, I received another big wooden box, and it had the salad plates, the dinner plates, and and the soup bowls in it. And then, a few days after that, I got another big wooden box, which had the big tureens in it, and the platter and gravy bowl. So that was a real surprise to me.
I remember you having these in the sort of in the second story of the old farmhouse near Otley.
I didn't
And
have a dish cover.
You didn't have this covered, but you had opened them up and they were packed with like shredded newspaper or sawdust.
Excelsior. It was called Excelsior.
What is
It was shredded wood,
Oh, okay. Like sawdust
And,
almost.
packed
Yeah.
very well.
And nothing got broken on the way.
Well, you're supposed to ring it where it rings true. There's one cup that doesn't quite ring true. I think it's got a little crack or a little chip.
Oh, ring it, I mean like,
Yeah, you ring it. Make your ring like this.
oh,
It's
one
supposed to
doesn't sound quite right?
No, it doesn't sound
Oh.
quite right.
Okay, well, it's still pretty amazing.
Now these dishes, this is a set of 8. This is Bavarian china, very, very thin. You can almost see through it.
Mm-hmm.
We kids really didn't touch this at Mom's house. This was a wedding present to my mom and dad. And so through the years I have acquired that. This is a set of 12 white dinner plates which belonged to my grandmother on my dad's side. She was a Kuiper married to a Mathis. And I had a set of 12 of those. I never knew her. She died before I was born.
Now you have some old school books here too.
Yes.
Quite a collection. It challenges, I think, the school books that kids have nowadays in school.
This is an arithmetic book that belonged to my dad. I don't know if there's a date. Yeah, 18... something in there. I can't read it. It's too faint.
So did your dad like arithmetic and numbers and...
Well, yeah, he did all his own bookkeeping. I guess he did. This is a Dutch book that says, "A Merry Christmas to John Mathis from your mother."
So John Mathis being your dad.
Yeah, my dad. And this date is 1918, and it is Dutch. I cannot read a word.
Do you know what subject it was?
Well, I think it's a religious book of some kind, but I really don't, I can't read it.
So we'll have to translate that on Google.
Okay. Now we get to this is my arithmetic book.
You had that at the European School number 3?
European number 3 school, the only school I ever had. And that was my book, and this was a reader. I think these came in series. This is book 1, and I don't know how far they went. Very interesting, probably I think this even was around before Jane.
Dick and Jane.
Dick and Jane and all that. Kind of interesting. Then, here, my sister Esther passed away, and we had to go through her things and keep and sort and throw away and give away and what to. And I found these, and these are letters which Esther, my sister, received from her grandmother, Mathis, the one that owned the white plates. When she was a child, she got these letters, and I can't read those either because they are Dutch.
Now, how far away would they have lived from each other?
Oh, 3 miles.
3 miles, but they wrote letters and sent letters to each other.
Yeah, because they did not travel back and forth very much.
Well, that's interesting.
Okay.
Thank you for sharing that.
Tell you a story about some Indian beadwork. This was traded by my dad when he was about 5 years old to some Native American Indians who camped north of Pella, where he lived when he was a little boy. And my dad had a puppy. Well, for some reason, the Indians wanted his puppy. So instead of buying and selling things, the Indians bartered. And they traded this piece of beadwork for the puppy that my dad had. And I'd like to think that he had other puppies to play with, but that I will never know. It has come down through my family through a lot of different directions, and finally it is mine.
Now, what is the design on?
Well, I don't know what the design is. It is a repeat, and it may indicate something.
Are they animals, like ducks?
Well, they sort of look like animals.
Mm-hmm.
But it is like 130 years old, so it's kind of fragile. And I had to have this box made for it by a local carpenter. Then I also have a ruby necklace, which was my mother's, and it too came down the family different directions, and now I have it and love it. And my ring was given to me by my husband when he was in Germany, and it's my birthstone opal, and it fit perfectly. I do not know how he was so lucky.
Tell us about all these little interesting toys that you have here in your cabinet.
Well, I will show you. First, these aren't toys. These are my baby shoes. And I have to tell you something about these. I was bad once, only once.
Ah,
I went in the closet and cut off all the little buttons. I have no idea why. So years later, when we moved to Illinois, there was an antique store there. He sold little old-fashioned buttons. I bought the buttons, put them back on my shoes, and if I didn't tell this story, nobody would know how bad I
wait,
was.
so you had no buttons on your shoes until when you were many, many decades later? So you walked around with no...
I think I was through wearing them by
Oh.
then, but whatever. Okay. These are 3 little irons, which you could actually put on the stove and heat carefully. And they belong to my 3 sisters, Sarah, Agnes, and Esther.
And those were meant to be toys.
They are toys, but I remember heating this on the stove and ironing the little puff sleeves where you couldn't get a big iron in.
And so girls like to have toys like that? I mean, that looks like work to me.
That was just the toy of the century. This is a little iron rabbit. It should be valuable what it is, I don't know. I don't even know where I got it. My brother and I argued about whose it was. I painted it white, it wrinkled. He wasn't happy with me, but I still got the rabbit.
What color was it before you painted it?
Just iron.
Oh,
And this is a little toy stove that belonged to my sister Sarah. And she should not have let me do this, but I played outdoors in the sand pile with these little kettles and skillets, and they got rusty.
so this is like a wood-burning stove or a coal-burning stove? What
Yeah.
would it have been? And just like what your mom might have had?
Yeah, my mom had a stove very similar to this. Actually, this is the oven.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where you would have put the wood in to fire. And you see, these even came out. And on my mom's stove, I remember her having a big kettle. She would take this lid off, put the kettle directly on the fire.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an iron kettle, and you never tasted better meat.
Mm. So you probably kept that stove burning all day long?
Oh yeah, she baked bread about every day. She baked 50 pounds of flour in a week's time.
Wow.
This is a little coffee grinder that belonged to my sister Agnes. And you would put coffee beans in here, grind, and here's a little drawer where the ground coffee came out.
And again, this is a toy, or this is actually
This
something
is a
useful?
toy.
Oh,
Well,
you could use it for real.
I guess you could use it for real, but it was a toy. And this is a little drinking cup that my dad, see it pulls up, that my dad used to take to school.
And it didn't leak.
Didn't leak.
Well, that looks like silver or something valuable. That's,
Well, wouldn't you think it was nickel or something?
maybe, I don't know.
But
Is that something kids commonly had?
yeah, this was your
little capsule?
drinking.
Why did it have to be so small? You put it in your pocket, or?
Didn't have much to drink. You had
No.
to go over to the neighbors to get a bucket of water.
But did you have like little lunch boxes or anything like that for when you went to school?
They were tobacco boxes.
Oh,
My uncle smoked,
Yeah.
and we would get little boxes from him and paint them so they weren't so icky looking.
it probably smelled bad. That
Yeah, well, whatever. And this is a set of dishes which my mother was given by her grandmother, which would have been a Mrs. Vanderwilt. And they're a strange size. They're almost too much for a play set, but they are not grown up.
And so that's everything.
Dishes.
Those are all set up there.
What?
That's a set up there.
Yeah, this
Oh.
is a set. It's a, and I think it's so unbalanced because look how big the cup is,
Mm-hmm.
and the coffee or the teapot is so small. The sugar bowl is enormous. It's totally out of proportion, I think.
But kids played with it. And
Yeah.
your mom played
Well,
with it.
supposedly, I didn't argue when she gave it to me. I just
No.
accepted it gracefully.
So now tell us about this interesting
Well, this doll belonged to my sister Sarah. She has a leather body, and it is stuffed with sawdust.
Sawdust.
And she had her, well, my sister lived to be 102, and so this doll is well over 100 years old.
That was hers when she was little.
Yeah.
Oh.
I don't think she played with it much,
Oh.
but...
And then you have some kind of a funny looking little seat here. What in the
Well,
world is this?
I grew up in the horse and buggy days, and literally we did not have a car until I was at least about 10 years old. And then before that, we went every place with horse and buggy. And little seats like this were called carriage seats, and they were set on the floor. So you had more layers to put kids. I mean, they sat on the seat, they sat here, they sat on the floor, they sat...
So the littlest kid sat on this?
Uh-huh, I think that was me.
Okay. That's funny.
So
Now, is this original, or have you refinished this?
This is original. I did make another cover for it a while back. I took that off and put on the original cover.
I think I remember sitting on this when I was a kid.
I think you did too.
Yeah. All right, thank you very much. Now I think we have another cabinet.
Yeah, we have more toys over there.
So we have some more little toys in here?
Yes, we have a few. These are my little doll dishes. And they have been through the dirt. They have been everywhere imaginable. And there aren't many pieces left. But they were mine. And then over here is a set that belonged to my oldest sister, Sarah. It is a little sugar and creamer, a butter dish, and a spoon holder.
And these were toys?
And these were toys. I don't know why they didn't break,
They
but
look like crystal to me.
yeah. And this is, everybody wants to call these salt cellars. They're not. They're a little toy berry bowl and little toy berry dishes.
So you ate like strawberries or raspberries?
Well, those belong to Esther, I believe. So I don't think she let me use them. This was given to us by Kurt and Ann for our 50th wedding anniversary. And these are things that have come from Thailand. And I think they're a certain brand.
Well, that's the Ilardro, but
Okay.
the elephant came from Thailand.
Okay, this came from
Yeah.
Thailand. All right. It's polar bear, little girl with a chicken. I think they thought of me carrying chickens around.
I think
So that is all that we have here.
So the Heisers were always into clocks, it seems, even though they were never on time for anything. But my grandpa, William Huyser, was a farmer and then ran a dairy. And then when he retired from the dairy, he converted his dairy into a furniture refinishing shop. And at one point, he had over 300 clocks in his house. His wife, Evelyn Huyser, eventually, when she was moving out of her house, gave everybody a clock from the collection. And I believe this is one of them, isn't that correct?
This is the one that Evie gave to Irvin, and it needed refinishing, so he refinished it. He polished the dial and, of course, the pendulum, and went into every little detail, so it was perfect.
I remember trying to sleep at Grandpa Heiser's house, and there was a grandfather clock that the pendulum clunked against the side. And so Grandma Huyser had to come out and stop the clock in the middle of the night so I could sleep.
I think a lot of the clocks chimed at different times, didn't they?
Yeah, I know.
They were all off time.
Had to wind them. Everyone had to be wound differently. Some were wound every week, some were wound like every couple of days, some were wound every day, and he seemed to know which ones. So,
It's a lot of work to keep them all on.
so we have another clock that we'll go to next. So this is our last clock, and I believe this came from Jim Huyser, the landlord on the farm we used to rent in Raleigh. Isn't that correct?
That's right. It was sold on Jim Huyser's sale. Jim Huyser was a great half-uncle of Irvin. And Evie, Irvin's stepmother, thought Irvin should have something to remember Jim by. So she bought the clock, which is called a banjo clock, and gave it to Irvin, which I thought was rather nice.
Yeah, so does it ever run? Does it sound like a banjo when it rings?
No, not really. It's the shape that
Mm-hmm.
designates it as a banjo clock.
So it must be over 100 years old?
Oh, definitely. More than 100.
So my recollection is that Jim came from Holland with his father Art Huyser in 1885, and his real name was Adrianus for some reason. That was his real name, but they changed it to Jim, probably because it was easy to pronounce. So
I think so.
Jim had some other interesting clocks. I remember he had what was called an anniversary clock. That's one of those clocks in those glass domes.
It's in a glass
You
dome.
wind
yeah.
it once a year, usually on Christmas Day.
How could that be?
It had very little friction, and it had a wire, and these weights spun around and suspended from this wire. And I remember watching that. That was fascinating. We don't know what happened to that one.
What I remember about Jim Huyser was his wife's strong coffee. She boiled it for an hour on the stove.
Maybe she used this clock to count how long
I don't know.
the coffee boiled. Well, that's the last clock we have.
These are my dad's sleigh bells. When I was a kid, he would hitch a team up to a bobsled and take us for a sleigh ride over the snow. Of course, it made no noise, just quiet, and then the sleigh bells would ring. When I was a little girl, my mother had an organ. We called them parlor organs. And if we didn't know what to do, we were bored, we'd go in there, and none of us knew a note of music. None of us ever had a lesson. But if you figured out where middle C was, you could figure out the other notes. So we pedaled around and played. And so when I got married, I missed that. So I learned that an old neighbor of mine was not well, wanted to sell her organ, and so I bought it from her for $10. Then I took it all apart, it was real dark, and refinished it, and it's oak. At one time it had a large top on it, but the idea then was to make them look modern, so sometime in our moving, we left the top somewhere. And I don't play well, but I enjoy it. I'm going to resign.
The snow
He's
is
gonna go
having
on
a hard
strike.
day. Can't overwork my stuff.
Okay. Everyone get ready. Action.